This is a podcast by the News Minute, and you are listening to South Central.
Hello and welcome to South Central, a TNM podcast where we put South at the center. I am Dhanya Rajendran, your host, and we are recording on the 15th of December at 3:15 p.m. In this week's episode, we look at, is the union government messing up state finances, or are states overspending on welfare measures? And second, we look at the Pattanamthitta rape case where a young woman has accused 58 men of sexually assaulting her. Before we go to our studio guests, in fact, we have a full studio. We were almost going to file a missing persons complaint, but Leena Reghunath has decided to come back to Bengaluru. So before I welcome all the guests, I just want to quickly say that we are starting a new reporting project. It's a full year reporting project called The Rise of the Cults. As you know, we have reported on cults like Nityananda and many others. So this year, TNM reporters will follow cults across South India, see what their secrets are, where they get their money from, where do they get their following from, cutting across age groups, communities. So the project is called The Rise of the Cults. So we have opened a fund for that, The Rise of the Cults. You can contribute, and I think the first story will be dropping next week itself. Introducing now people in the studio and joining us from Delhi. Pooja Prasanna in the studio, reporting head of the News Minute. Welcome, Pooja.
Thank you, Dhanya. Nice to have a full studio after a while.
Yeah, Leena Reghunath back in the studio finally, and I hope you're going to be in Bengaluru for at least a few weeks.
Hello, guilty as charged, and yes, I'll pay my penalty and be here.
And making a reappearance on the show, it's just 10 episodes, but Tara Krishnaswamy is back. Welcome, Tara, to the show.
Thank you, Dhanya. Couldn't stay away from your Pongal delights.
And joining us from Delhi is Tushar Chakabarthy. Tushar is a senior analyst at the PRS Legislative Research. Welcome, Tushar, to South Central.
Hi, Dhanya. Glad to be here.
Hi. So before we go to the headlines, which Pooja will read out now, I just want to tell everyone that South Central drops every Friday. So do make it your weekend listening habit and do follow us on Spotify, Apple and other podcast platforms. Pooja?
Let's look at the headlines. Andhra government signs 14,000 crore semiconductor deal with Japanese firm. And this is interesting for us because they had, while Telangana is struggling to get semiconductor units, manufacturing units to their state, Andhra gets because of BJP presence there. Karnataka High Court.
But it's also Nadu, not just BJP presence, right?
No, it's about granting the project.
Yeah, of course,
there,
yeah.
So, yeah. Karnataka High Court says seized assets cannot be transferred to Jayalalitha's heirs. Dhanya, you take the first.
No, Jay Deepa and Jay Deepak, Jayalalitha's niece and nephew, have been saying that they are the heirs. But this is related to what was actually seized from a house during the raids. So the High Court has now said that those cannot be given to the family. But what I'm wondering is, what will the government do with this? The whole problem was that there had to be round-the-clock security guard. There was a lot of money being spent in guarding Jayalalitha's shoes and, her sari and whatever was seized during that time in the 1990s.
This is a developing story from Kerala. Kerala family claims man attains samadhi, secret burial becomes communal row. Our entire office right now, they're watching videos, I have to add. And it's like breaking news. Every minute they're like, oh, they reached here, they reached there. Then you're more excited than all of them.
In the sense, it's a bizarre story, right? And we have this sort of running bet in office that Kerala has the most bizarre stories every year. And this, I think, January itself, we have one. So the story is basically about a man in his 70s. His name is Gopan. He became a Swami at some point of his life. So last week or so, a few days ago, he has basically disappeared or he's missing. So neighbors file a complaint to the police because a notice comes up in the area saying he has attained samadhi. So they're like, where the hell is his dead body? So they go and file a missing persons complaint. The police come to the house and he has two sons who say that my father decided when he's going to die. So he just went to the vacant plot in the house, in outside the house, and he died there. He attained samadhi, not died. They clearly told us you cannot use the word died. He attained samadhi there, and they built a memorial over the dead body. So the police and the collector and the sub-collector said that it has to be exhumed because now you have to do a post-mortem. And they are just not allowing. The mother and the two sons are sitting in front of the memorial saying that you will have to kill us. Then they turn the entire thing communal because there are a lot of Muslims living in the area. They're like, Muslims want to take this area, which is why. But the visuals were very stunning for many reasons. One is, of course, this family protesting and all the Hindu groups then coming and saying this is against Hinduism. what is Hindutva or Hinduism in a man dying and the police wanting to follow legal proceedings, right? And what really fascinated me are also the other people in the locality, including Hindus, saying that, why are you communalizing this? Let the cops do their job.
No, this is absurd theatre, live telecasted, and and the Malayali trolling is visible
And turning communal.
and turning communal, and the his wife, his two kids, the way they stick to the word samadhi, 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 samadhi. They're making sure that word sticks and it's not murdered or killed or anything else. And the way the neighbors
So
are
the cop
reacting
told
to the
us,
story.
we don't know if there is a body inside, right? We have to first, this is a family's version. We don't know if there's a body
It's
inside.
very scary.
Yeah.
Karnataka Contractors Association writes to 7 ministers over pending payments and they threaten another protest. Now, governments have changed, but contractors still on protest. BRS MLA Kaushik Reddy gets conditional bail. He was arrested for allegedly creating ruckus and misbehavior with Jagtial MLA Sanjay Kumar during a meeting. Now, House panel to summon Meta for CEO Zuckerberg's claim on Indian elections. He had said Dubey, who is the head of the parliamentary committee, said that incorrect information about any democratic country tarnishes its image. I think Zuckerberg had just said that, this was a big year. 2024 was a year of big elections. And, the BJP, which is the ruling government, lost its majority, lost the numbers that they had. That's all he said.
So we move to our first topic, which is the union government messing up state finances, or are states overspending on welfare measures? So the reason why we took up this discussion is also because it's been a pet topic of the News Minute for many years. And every year it keeps coming up. I think 2 days ago, Karnataka Chief Minister Siddaramaiah and Tamil Nadu ministers, Thangam Tenarasu I saw, put out statements saying that once again, that these states are not getting in return in proportion to the taxes that they are paying. So this has been a constant problem between the union government and the state governments, especially in South India. So we have Tushar. Tushar, I want to just open with your thoughts on the chief ministers of southern states, especially saying that they are not getting back what they are liable to from the taxes they pay.
Right. Thank you, Dhanya. So when we look at this entire question around devolution and Finance Commission awards, there are two things that we need to keep in mind. The first, of course, the absolute devolution that is taken out of the centre's taxes and given to states in a proportion determined according to the recommendation of the Finance Commission. Now, if you look at the latest Finance Commission, whose award period is currently in force, that is the 15th Finance Commission. And the 15th Finance Commission distributed those funds based on certain principles of need, equity. So if you look at the principle of equity, right, which says that because there are such wide socioeconomic differences and disparities across Indian states, you need to support states that are doing poorly. So, of the criteria that the Finance Commission has selected for devolving funds or distribution of funds from center to states, something called an income distance as to how poor you are compared to the state which is at the top in terms of your per capita income determines how much money you're going to get out of center's taxes. And that is by far the largest component in deciding who gets how much. Now, this is, and in here, the share of the southern states could be lesser than than other states such as Uttar Pradesh, Bihar or Rajasthan, because there has been a significant increase in per capita income of these states. So if you look at Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, even Kerala, their per capita GSDP is well over 3 lakhs in the last financial year, as compared to Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, whose per capita GSDP is less than 1 lakh rupees. So that is the kind of disparity that you currently have, and that is the kind of disparity that the Finance Commission is trying to bridge. Or if not bridge, then maybe fill to some extent. On the second part, there are the Finance Commission transfers are not the only source of fund flow from the union to the states. You have various types of grants. You have, until very recently, you had GST compensation grants. You have something called revenue deficit grants. You have grants for implementing centrally sponsored schemes. And in certain of these grants, we've seen that southern states end up doing well as compared to other states. Or states that get higher devolution. For example, according to some data crunching that we at PRS did, we found that between 17-18 and 21-22, the per capita transfers for centrally sponsored schemes was higher for states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka as compared to Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Now, what may be pinching some of the southern states is the fact that a couple of these grants are now coming to an end. Now, you combine this guarantee going away with the fact that some of the grants recommended by the Finance Commission are also tapering off. For example, the revenue deficit grants, the majority of them have already been given to states by 23-24. So both of these factors coinciding, and some of the states may be feeling a bit of pinch in the resource flow from the central government.
Okay, so Pooja and Tara, let's say I don't understand devolution, divisible pool, anything. How do you explain this in very simple terms? Because people keep seeing these statements by the Southern chief ministers, finance ministers. We've also had multiple conferences called, right? How would you let me explain it?
I have done a let me explain on this, but very quickly, a divisive pool is where the money collected from the tax, and Tara can jump in if I'm getting this wrong, is put in one pool, right? Now, that is with the union government. That is then divided. Now, there are two types of transaction that happen, horizontal and vertical. So, there is, the kind of transfer that happens from the union government to the states, and from states which need more money, like say Uttar Pradesh or Jharkhand or Bihar, they get extra money. That is the bottom line of how the devolution happens. Now, the problem with this is, not everything, like Tushar pointed, not everything comes into the divisive pool. When you charge cess and surcharge, that is outside of the divisive pool. Now, the Narendra Modi government has increased the percentage of cess and surcharge. That means it is with the union government to do what they want with that money. That does not go to the state directly. Why is that important? Because what you get, at least whatever money you're getting from this pool, is for you to do what you want with it, right? It doesn't come with conditions. They can't tell you what you can use it on. Whereas if they give the grants like the centrally sponsored schemes, those comes with certain conditions. So they'll say, for example, there is a scheme, I will give you money to dig up a lake or a pond of some sort. Now, they'll not say, okay, where you need it, you can put it, how you want to use it, you can. They'll say the pond has to be of a certain area. It has to be, and Kerala has taken this up again and again, saying we don't have that kind of, area because it's a closely packed state. Then the union government says we can't give you money for it. Mm-hmm. So the problem is that the untied funds, right, without conditions, that pool is reducing for the states.
Tara?
Yeah, so I think Pooja got it absolutely right. The cesses actually have more than doubled in the past between the 14th Finance Commission and now. And they've gone from about 10% to 12% to 24%. So that means that that's the amount of revenues that are being retained by the union government and not shared. So what has happened is, as it is, the state governments that were getting the 42% devolution as recommended by the 14th Finance Commission, when it came to the 15th Finance Commission, because of the use of the 2011 census, as it is, they saw it go down. Now, because the cesses increased, from that 42%, you've effectively gone down to 29 to 32%, depending on the year, is devolved. There's almost a 10 to 12, 13% decline in the percentage share of revenues that each state is getting. While population has gone up, your GST, that collections have gone up, your state GDP has gone up, etc. Right? The second, to Pranay's point, while income distance is extremely important in calculating the devolutions, Tushar's point, what happens is the income distance is such that it is not that any state in India is like Singapore or like, one of the Western states, right? Everyone is poor in a certain sense. Everyone battles with a certain degree of hunger, a certain degree of poverty, a certain degree of lack of education and joblessness. So yes, there are states that are suffering way more, but the other states are suffering less. It's not that they're not suffering. So as a state that is getting far less finances, if you look at the proportion of population between, say, Karnataka and a Bihar, okay, or a Karnataka and a Uttar Pradesh or Maharashtra, you may have a 4x, 5x, even 10x differential. But the difference in devolution can be 50x. Karnataka can get 11 paisa for every rupee, whereas Bihar gets 5.72 paisa for every rupee, right? So it is not proportional. That is the problem. You've seen decline after decline, increase of cesses and tied funds. Why does Kerala care about dropout rates at primary and secondary levels? It's reasonably under control. The incremental spend you need is not much to maintain it. Whereas if you take a state like Gujarat, for example,
So you mean the
have
grant
tremendous
is for
problems.
things like that?
The grant is for Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. You have the centrally, because of concurrent lists, you have GOI overreach, union overreach into state subjects, and now they are granting for things that states should be able to manage on their own.
But Dhanya, if I can just go back to what Tushar was talking about, right? The percentage based on which the final percent of how much each state gets. That in itself is contested, isn't it, Tushar? Because why should income distance, which is your equity basically, be given 45%? Right? That again means that states that have not been for many decades not performing, getting more money. Add to that another 15% for population based on the 2011 census. Whereas if you look at the percentage for states that are performing well, which is your tax effort, 2.5%, and demographic performance, which is another 12.5%. So 15% for good performance and 45 plus 15, how much is that? 60% for not performing. That in itself is an issue, isn't it?
So I would look at it slightly differently, and I can tell you what the commission has said. So the idea is that people living across states should have a minimum level of service delivery, irrespective of whichever state they're in. If they're living in the country, they should have a minimum level of education. They should have a minimum level of healthcare and other welfare standards that they should get by way of state delivery. And the intent of the commission, when in giving this award, is that the larger your population or the larger your area, higher the cost of service delivery. Right. So that is how it is factored into the entire devolution formula, or the formula which dictates how much money is going to flow from the center to the states and in what proportion. And again, income distance in itself has traditionally been a very, very significant proportion for determining how much money is flowing to the states, because the thrust on equity has been as one of the cornerstones when the Union Finance Commission sits down to decide how much is to be given to which state. And as far as cesses and surcharges is concerned, which was a discussion happening just shortly before, I would want to add that cesses and surcharges went up significantly during the COVID period, but now they have come back to their pre-COVID levels. And if you look at recommendations or observations by the central bank, which is the Reserve Bank of India, it has also held that charging cesses and surcharges neutralizes the impact of higher devolution of taxes recommended by successive finance commissions. Right. So the Constitution very clearly says that the divisible pool of taxes is arrived at after you sort of take away the cost of collecting taxes and cesses and surcharges. And this problem was also noticed by the 15th Finance Commission. But as far as the union has the power to raise and levy cesses and surcharges, they have done what in their wisdom they think to be right.
So Tushar, you mentioned population, that population becomes one big crux of how the money is given, but that is the whole fight, right? For example, for years, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, etc. had policies which sort control population. And of course, birth rates are going down across states, but still these states perform much better than the others. And why should they be punished? And the worry is that when the next census comes and these states have further controlled population, then would they call it punishment, right? Because of our less population, we get less money. I just want to read out from a story that we had done. Maria, my colleague, had done a story last year in which she looked at what is the central contribution of states to central taxes and what is the share of the divisible pool. She included central goods and services tax, integrated GST, direct taxes, and cess and surcharge while she was calculating this. So in 5 years, which is between 2018-19 to 22-23, Karnataka received 20 paisa for every 1 rupee, then 18 paisa, 12 paisa, 14 paisa, and 11 paisa. Right? Tamil Nadu got 25, 22, 23, 25, and 22 paisa. Kerala is higher. It gets 75, 65, 49, 55, and 46 paisa, which is for every rupee of tax, they get back this. Uttar Pradesh got 1.98, 1.67, 2.47, 1.89, and 1.72. What was high was Bihar, which got 3.36, 5.06, 5.13, 6.15, and 5.9. So the question continuously being asked is, can population be the measure, right? In which the divisible pool is also decided.
So there are two things here. Earlier, it was taken based on the 1971 census, which was not so drastic. The gap was not so drastic. Then it was a combination of 1971 and 2011. Now it is purely based on 2011. That is the problem number one. And the second point that, I had an interview of Tejasvi Surya. I was watching it, and their defense is that, for example, if Gulbarga is not performing well, or a Raichur in Karnataka is not performing well,
wouldn't Bengaluru give some money?
Give some money.
No, of course, that is understandable. That economics is understandable.
No, that actually, they're not realizing that they're making the point that even the Congress here is making, right? Because if Bangalore is performing well, and the GDP of Bangalore is good, doesn't mean the entire state is uniform. This same goes for Telangana. Hyderabad is performing well, maybe not in Adilabad. So shouldn't the state get more money to develop the rest of the regions, right?
That's why I was saying income distance doesn't mean that the state actually does well. There's enough inequity. But I think in a sense, we are arguing over the size of a pizza pie that is deliberately being controlled. And then there is a catfight for the pieces. See, the terms of reference are unilaterally issued by the union, versus there is a notion of vertical devolution where you decide how much goes to the union versus the states, which is what the Finance Commission, one of the things the Finance Commission is doing. So there is no reason, as India matures as a democracy, to make sure that the terms of reference are also federally issued, where you have a committee, for example, represented by various states, and there is a much more open discussion and input around a more balanced terms of reference, in which case this 2011 census, for example, or how much we should be the weightage for income distance, or any one of the particular criteria is debatable. That is one. Given that we do need to make sure equity happens, right? There is inequity within the state, which is why we're talking about this. The second thing that can be done to enlarge the size of the pizza pie is the cesses and surcharges can go down. But the most important thing, the reason that we are here, that we didn't have the same problem before. We had a problem, for example, when the noon meal scheme was sought to be expanded statewide to feed 66 lakh children in Tamil Nadu by MGR in 1982. Okay, the money was not there. It needed some 100 odd crores. They went to World Bank. They said, sorry, if you want to do it conditionally, we will fund you. But if you want to do it universally, we will not fund you. Then they went to the union government. In fact, Dr. Manmohan Singh was in the planning commission then. And there is this famous scene between them where, MGR asks for the money and Manmohan Singh says, well, make it conditional. Why are you giving it to everybody? And supposedly MGR threw the coffee, right? Because he was angry that he wasn't getting it. And he's basically saying that, look, the way poverty is that if you're hungry, you can't learn. And if the only condition under which any parent chooses to not educate their child and not think about the parent's future, the child's future, is when immediate hunger is the problem. When they can't feed them today, there is no question of educating them for tomorrow. Otherwise, every parent will sacrifice to educate. And if you make it conditional, And this is the incredible thing he said. If you make it conditional, it is the girls who will not be sent to school. Because the minute you say, X per child or per family, or, put a line, it's the girls who will not be educated. At the end of this, how did he generate the money? From state finances, by increasing taxes, by introducing, liquor, because Tamil Nadu was under prohibition then. So many other ways. Each government employee gave up their monthly salary, etc. The point is that so long as you constrain states from innovating around tax revenues and generating their own tax revenues and therefore increasing the size of the pie, you're going to be having a cat fight, a dog fight for a limited sized pie. So, you have, instead of saying, you're the boss, you want to spend 52,000 crores on guarantees, or, then this is the weird thing, right? Whether it is Gujarat, whether it is Karnataka, whether it's Tamil Nadu, the three states are spending exactly the same amount, almost exactly the same amount per capita on welfare schemes, right? On development schemes. But they have completely different outcomes, which is, to Tushar's point, depends on, your administrative efficiency, state capacity, whatever it is, right? The level of malnutrition in Gujarat is very, very high. The level of stunting is very high. The level of dropouts is higher, girls, which is very different in a Kerala or a Tamil Nadu or a Karnataka. Karnataka also has these problems. The point is that if you allow states to innovate around the schemes that they need to deliver, Kerala doesn't have the need to dig water bodies. Rajasthan does have huge need to dig water bodies. Kerala and Tamil Nadu don't have the same dropout problem that Gujarat has. If you allow them to innovate around their taxes, you will have far more flexibility, and it looks like it is one state against the other. But that is because you're refusing to let them have control over their own taxes. They are supposed to deliver all the government services to the citizens. The union government cannot deliver it. It is the state governments that deliver, from water to electricity to food to health to education. But then they have no control over their own finances. They cannot generate anything except for, petrol and liquor. So if you're going to tie their hands and feet and want them to run a race, it seems like a race. You untie it, they may run in completely different directions. There's many ways to skin the cat, and everyone may prosper. It's not a fixed pie, but you've made it a fixed pie by saying, I will hold all the taxes. This is my two
So
cents.
the fight, I think, if you look at the core of it, it's states asking some bit of control over how it spends. And when you're trying to centrally dictate how you're going to do it, then this kind of unhappiness will keep emerging, and you cannot just wish away. I think some part of having a federalism, a healthy democracy, is to understand why the states are time and again coming back with the same complaint.
And also politically, right? The BJP is not in power in many of the states, which is why, and these are the richest states per se, other than Gujarat and Maharashtra, of course. Tushar, because Tara spoke about welfare measures, and that is the other side of this coin, right? Where people say that the states are spending too much on welfare measures, which is why they do not have money to do other things. What is your take on welfare measures, Tushar, and how much states are spending?
Right. So before I go into welfare measures, a lot of people don't realize that whether you look at receipts or whether you look at expenditure, there isn't a lot of flexibility with states, right? If you look at your receipts, as Tara was recently saying, in terms of your revenue raising powers, after GST, most of the taxes that you are raising is based on the recommendation of the GST Council. So what you're left with taxes on petrol, liquor, stamp duty, vehicle taxes, and all of those things. And if you look at expenditure, a lot of your expenditure is already committed towards salaries, pensions, and interest payments. And add to that implementation of various CSS schemes, so almost 50% of your expenditure is already tied up. And if you take all your revenue components over which states have limited control or limited discretion, another 50% goes away there. So you have only 45-50% of your budget in which you have to implement welfare measures and undertake capital expenditure. So let's not forget that capital expenditure is also very important from the long-term perspective, right? So several states are implementing welfare schemes. We've seen 5 guarantees in Karnataka. I think almost 10 to 12 states are now implementing cash transfer schemes of women across the country, and not only in southern India. So the fact is that states can do welfare expenditure depending on their policy priorities. But given that how much deficit you can incur, how much borrowing you can do in a year is constant, and also the fact that your certain part of your expenditure is already committed, you would either have to increase revenue from the limited sources that you have, or you would either have to cut down on other expenditure, because there is a hard stop of 3%, 3.5% of your economy that you can borrow in a particular year, which is also called the fiscal deficit. So central government and the RBI ensures that limit states do not go over. So given that sort of hard ceiling, you can reprioritize expenditure, you can spend on welfare schemes depending on what you want to spend money, but then you have to also figure out how to either raise your revenue potential or what you are going to cut back on.
But then we go back to the same argument which Tara is saying, right? That your hands are tied, your feet are tied. And if a state wants to spend on welfare measures, why is it being told to decide this way or the other way? They're saying that give more funds to us. Let our funds be with us.
Also the emphasis on capital expenditure, right? And Tara has written about this extensively. Isn't, ensuring that women have money in their account, women have more disposable income,
or women can travel.
Women can travel, so that money is saved. That is probably as much important as capital expenditure, number one. And two, when people have more disposable income, that goes back into the system. They will end up buying more things that will help them, and also state generates more tax, isn't it?
But I was reading Yamini Iyer, who has, I've also heard her saying in many stages that this is a way where the state is like coming out, sort of saying that I'm not responsible, and therefore I will just give you this disposable money, whether it's 2,000 rupee per month or 1,000 rupee per month, and they're sort of copying out. So there are economists who do believe that welfare measures, or at least not welfare measures, cash transfers are not the way forward.
So I think, again, I'll make a minor point about GST and then we'll talk about this. The point I want to make is the reason the states also feel the pinch is because their growth, aka GST collections, have bounded in many states, whereas the returns that they are seeing have not grown at the same pace. Naturally, you feel like I'm growing the state, therefore I should be able to spend more, but I'm being held back. Okay, so that is one thing. So as far as welfare goes, again, we tend to posit things as either or, right? India is not a country of the levels of equity that you see in many other more mature democracies. The levels of inequity we see in India are enormous. There are people that earn literally 1,000 crore a day, and there are people that earn hundreds of crores a day, tens of hundreds of crores a day. In fact, I recently written in an article about Gujarat for the News Minute that if we continue to evaluate our sort of fiscal health using per capita income calculated by averages. But as you know, if you have 1,000 crore versus 54 rupees a day, it is going to seem like everybody earns a large amount of money.
I thought even in Telangana that was the issue. During
100%.
elections, they kept saying this.
That is why you have districts in Telangana, in Karnataka, that are in the bottom 100, bottom 150 districts in the country, whereas you don't have the same in some other states.
No,
right?
During the campaign, BRS was continuously saying our per capita is very high, per capita is very high.
But inequity is also very high, right?
And that also is problematic because the whole point of forming Telangana was that
Correct.
It's
the
more
inequity
uniform
between the states.
Exactly.
Again, I go back to it's not a uniform thing, right? At very many levels you have it. So that brings us to the question: what is the purpose of state? Is the purpose of state only to build things? Is to build roads and bridges and hospitals and be done? Or is the purpose of state to improve the human development? If the purpose of state is to improve human development, give people the basic tools, ensure that people aren't starving and hungry, ensure people are healthy, ensure people are well educated, and then set them free, then the human sort of nature of humanity tells you that people will go innovate, people will become entrepreneurs, some people will start companies, some people will be labor, etc. Right? That is the whole point of freedom and liberty. On the other hand, you have the levels of inequity where people cannot move, they cannot go buy sanitary napkins, they cannot go buy headache medicine without asking for money from a husband or a mother-in-law or somebody, because the entire system says, here is my marriage advertisement, I don't want a wife that works. right? So you have an entire culture that is built on, and India is the only country in South Asia where we have, other than Afghanistan, Pakistan, the kind of repressive regimes, the only democratic regime or semi-democratic regime, other semi-democratic regimes in South Asia, where the labor force participation of women is so low.
So
Basically, one half of the population.
Are you saying cash transfers to women is a good idea? And,
Absolutely a good idea, and we have studies now.
but for how long? But for how long?
Well, we are, as I said, at a state where we don't have a way for a good percentage of the population to earn, right? Labor force participation rate of women hovers in the late teens to 20, 25, 30%. So you have 70% of women not working, plus you have higher unemployment now, and you have poverty alleviation schemes, which you need. You have cash transfers, for example, for SC/ST women that Mamata Banerjee is doing in West Bengal, right? So because of poverty, and that is the same reason you have MNREGA, right? Where you have people able to at least get 3 meals a day. So until such point that our poverty, anemia, basic health, malnutrition levels and education levels are at UN SDG acceptable levels, the first 5 SDGs of multidimensional poverty, hunger, access to education, access to health, and gender parity, until they are at acceptable standards, we're going to have to throw as many darts as possible at the board, because we cannot have the population starving and malnutrition and expect that capital expenditure is going to yield productive work. 50% of the women of Gujarat are stunted/wasted children, girl children. Now, how do you expect them to grow and be productive labor? Labor force participation in Gujarat of women is reasonable. But how productive can that labor be? We know what anemia does. If you have low hemoglobin levels, your cognitive function declines, your memory declines, your brain function declines. How can these children learn and be productive?
Tushar, what are your thoughts? I mean, Tara and Pooja have vociferously said their take. So, what is your
One quick point. We don't, why are we not asking for how long should states that are not performing on other things, how long can they be bailed out? Why are we asking
But that's how
questions?
economies should also work, right? For example, even if you look at the issue of delimitation, yes, there is a lot of when the southern states say that there is going to be delimitation, and the number of seats that we have will only either increase nominally or maybe even decrease. You never know, depending on the population. We cannot do away with delimitation because in Bihar they need more seats, right? So there are two sides to every coin. I feel that a state like Tamil Nadu or Karnataka will have to at some point bear the expenses of certain other states, but to what level is the difference here, and what is the flexibility in the money they get?
So yeah, and there's innovative solutions.
Yeah,
the whole
yeah.
thing that says that why should somebody get more again is because it's a zero-sum game. Give them the freedom to generate more. Give all of us the freedom to generate more. The conversation changes. You're holding a fixed pie and then saying, why is somebody who's not performing getting it?
Yeah, so I'll just take closing comments from everyone before we go to the next topic. Yeah, Pooja?
No, I think the problem is the union government has been misleading by saying we have nothing to do with this. It is a finance commission that is setting the terms of reference, while that is not the case. The formula is theirs, the game is theirs. It is being played by somebody else. And the responsibility of generating tax, the responsibility of ensuring that the overall living condition improves for people is with the state. But what do you do with that money? How do you get that money? They have no say in it. So this consultation that is going on for the next finance commission, it is really a farce if you don't actually take the inputs by the states and actually implement it and just go by the union government.
Tara?
I'd say that there's a reason we came up with GST, because the pre-existing tax structure was considered to be very complicated by the businesses. That's fair. We've tried it. Now we see that the balance is tilted too far in a certain direction, where it provides states, which is basically the population of India, no control over its own revenue generation, or very little control over its own revenue generation. So a responsive government should actually come together to reconcile both this and say, how do we come up with a reasonable tax structure, but that is not uniform across the entire country. Most large countries don't have these kind of uniform structures when you have such a diversity and lack of equity. So I think that's where the union government is not being responsive, and it needs to pull up its socks.
To Delhi, Tushar.
Right. I think the 16th Finance Commission is currently carrying out its consultations, visiting different states, and I think it's an opportune time with state governments to drive home their points about their policy priorities and what they think should dictate the devolution formula going forward. If you look at the terms of reference of the 15th and 16th Finance Commission, the TOR of the 16th Finance Commission is very close to what is there in the Constitution. So, and it's not as prescriptive as it was in the case of the 15th Finance Commission. So, I believe it's really a good time for states to make their case, to sort of let the commission know of the kind of the disparities that is driving this sort of debate between certain groups of states. And I think the whatever the commission says will be watched very keenly, and it will make for an interesting read.
Are we going to pin all the hopes on the commission changing its mind and the terms of references?
The commission doesn't have the authority to do much.
Yeah.
So
If you take a look at what the big cases in the Supreme Court last year was, it's all on tax mining, how liquor is being taxed, and even the Kerala government saying that allow us to borrow from outside if you are not going to let
Give
us
us
borrow.
money. Huh?
So all these issues have reached the top court, and there are fights being happening. And I think it's high time that all these people sat down at a table and figured out how that it'll give the states the autonomy that they are trying to seek. Otherwise, it's going to go into a very bad situation with all of them protesting in the same voice over and again.
It's like Leena's weekly reminder. There is a court here, people.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
courts can do its job. Why are we not reminding them?
No, even with a case there that the solution is not so
Yeah.
easily
No,
coming.
to what Tushar is saying, just to close this, states have been making their demands. Tamil Nadu, in fact, according to the Finance Commission itself, put up a beautiful, a presentation asking, giving their thoughts on devolution. Thank you very much, Tushar.
Thank you, Dhanya.
Okay, so after the Delhi versus states discussion, we move on to our second topic of the day. It's a much more serious topic. It's a story that has shocked Kerala, and I would say the rest of the country who has read about it. An 18-year-old woman, a teenager in fact, has come out with a complaint that she was sexually harassed by 58 men in a span of 3 years. It started when she was around 14 or 15 years old, and then went on for some time. Now, she decided to speak up about it because there was an awareness class taken by Snehita. Snehita is a Kudumbashri program. It's a government program. They are counselors. They had gone to the school, to the college she's studying in, and they had taken a class, which is when she realized that she had been groomed for many years and she was being sexually abused and assaulted, and she had to speak up. So she went and told her teacher, who then took her to the CWC, or the Child Welfare Committee. A case has been, not a case, around 29 FIRs have been registered across 4 police stations in Pattanamthitta. And imagine the men who have been booked, they are mostly between 17 to 39. I think the oldest I saw in the 48 list was 39-year-old. They were her own classmates from school, her classmates or her college mates, her neighbors, her friends in the neighborhood. There were men from nearby districts. There are 2 people who are now abroad, so they'll have to now issue a red corner notice. Many of them were from her settlement itself. She lives in a Dalit settlement in Kerala. So the case has been very shocking. And joining us to discuss about it is a lawyer, Sandhya Raju. She practices in the Kerala High Court. She's joining us from Kochi. What were your first thoughts when, and this is not the first time that Kerala is seeing a case like this, right? We've had the experience of the Suryanelli case, where another young girl had accused around 60 men of sexually assaulting her in a period of a few days. So this, I think, and there was an ice cream parlor case. So Kerala has had multiple cases like this. What were your initial thoughts when you heard about the case?
Another Suryanelli has happened was what I felt. See, because the thing is, sexual abuse is sexual abuse among children. It's very intrinsic in Kerala, and the thing is, the way we are structured. Sometimes what happens is that children do not really disclose what is happening, and the fact that she allowed almost 40 people to abuse her and she was not confident enough to even tell or disclose anything till Snehida came into the picture is the real sad story of this entire situation. When we are talking about Kerala, if you look at all the indices, when you look at child protection, you look at women's rights protection, if you look at the data, we seem to be very uh, uh, favorable. I mean, so everyone is living in that bubble key. We are better than the rest of the country. But it's only when something like this comes out that we are really, questioning what actually happened. Because we have the child line, we have the child protection units, we have the child welfare committee. I think Kerala was one of the first states to have all the systems under the JJ Act, which included the child welfare committee, which included the district child protection units, we had counseling centers, we had snehidas, everything. And despite that, a child who at the age of 13, if she faced sexual abuse, she was not confident. And you have school counselors, so in all, and if she's been in the government school, there are school counselors there. So just imagine the entire the entire brokenness of the system, which allowed almost 40 people to abuse her. That is the sad state
So
of
it's actually
affairs.
58 people that she has named. Till yesterday, the police could only arrest around
Yeah.
48. I think the number may have even gone up. But, when I was actually editing
Yeah.
the stories which were coming in, I'll just quickly go to Leena also now. One thing which I kept wondering is that at some point of time, somebody should have said, right, this should not happen. Now, while the broken system is indeed a problem, now my colleague Chris had gone to the settlement where she lives, and she had gone to the town nearby. People have been arrested from all that place. So what has been happening is that there was a male friend of hers who there's a small hillock on either sides are their houses. They are good friends. At some point of time, he clicks certain pictures of hers because and then he threatens her and asks her to give sexual favors to his friend. The friend then refers her to two other friends. Then her pictures, her contact number gets circulated everywhere. You know how it is when you have close knit societies, right? People are like, this girl is there, this is her number. So people started messaging her on Instagram, on her WhatsApp. I mean, she didn't have a phone herself. So they were always communicating on her father's phone. And then around 60 men, people spread across two or three different areas and from different districts were getting her number, contacting her. They would tell her, they would just tell her to force to come to a certain place, and then either they would take her in a car. There have been 3 gang rapes at least, and one place where she was continuously getting abused was the Pattanamthitta General Hospital. So Chris went there also, where there is a block which is a sort of abandoned, but there is CCTV and everything. So they were taking her in the night to that place. The second place was the private bus stand. So there's an abandoned bus in that bus stand where some of these sexual assaults and even a gang rape has taken place. So while I was reading this, I was thinking, let's say we are 4 men, right? And we are in some group where, or let's say somebody sending us a message saying there is this thing happening, you can message that girl. We are, if 60 people did the crime, we have to assume that messages like this reached 300, 400,000 people were aware of it. Didn't one person feel like saying that, this should not happen?
Didn't her father find it odd that strange men are messaging her?
No, the father wasn't technologically advanced
And
to
apparently
know and didn't.
he was an alcoholic, is
He
what
was an
the
alcoholic
CWC
full
said. Yeah.
time under the. So in the last episode of South Central 2, I brought this French case of Giselle Pellicot, and the kind of when we say not all men, but then of course every other man were in the neighborhood. Her husband, a man of trust that she had, was advertising that she's available for sex, and he drugs her, and where she goes into an unconscious level, and men in the neighborhood, almost in a few kilometers radius around her, come in to rape her when she's unconscious. And then we all wondered why, if so many men knew, and so many men when they came in and knew that she was unconscious, not one of them alerted the police or alerted the system or alerted her to say that this is happening to you in some way, and even an anonymous letter to drop her to tell her that this is happening to you while you are asleep. This is the same way. And I don't know how many of them, but most of these people who have assaulted this girl too is from young,
Yeah, they're all in their 20s.
they're all, most of them are in their 20s.
It's shocking, right?
And
we speak so much about being liberal, progressive, this, that.
Right.
Like not one person thought, and people from a college, like to warn, to say that, to tell somebody in authority, right, that there is a girl who's perhaps being assaulted in this way.
Yeah, perhaps she's being paraded, and the kind of the society that puts these blame on the woman again, once again, going back to the Surya Nelly case, the stories that were told about the parents, about, unless and until again women's right groups, Anveshi and all of them stepped in and fought for the right. Even a high court judge, of Kerala made an open statement to the press saying that she was an immoral character, they were taking her around, and this is child prostitution and all of that. Whereas I was going back and listening to her parents' interviews after a long time, and they were saying that at one point two people came in to say that we were not involved, we were trying to help her, and so please take us out from this case. They were making this appeal to the mother, and the mother just went in and told the daughter, just from the next room, just take a look at them and tell them whether they were actually trying to help you or harm you. And the girl told that they were one of the people who had harmed her, and she was like, she went violent at that two people who were at a house. She said, whatever I saw in front of me, I just started thrashing them with it and throwing them. But the kind of malicious campaign that was being run against even the parents of the Surya, I think all of our female sexuality understanding of all these things somehow started around how this case was discussed, and how women and their sexuality and all was discussed at that time. And a lot of things changed when television started stepping, and we could hear directly from the parents, their voice was recorded. So this is all going to be played again, like the way the child for 5 years have been enduring this and didn't find one person that she could trust to and go and open up. They are going to play this in the courtroom in against the girl and say, hey, she was maybe we know the narratives that they push at that point.
In fact, if you have any Malayali friends, you will see them talking a lot about Surya Nelly at this point. The Surya Nelly case was something which happened in 1996, where this girl was taken to several places. According to the prosecution, she was raped by 37 different people in 67 different occasions. And eventually the High Court convicted just one man. This was a case where the girl had even said that the Congress leader PJ Kurian was one of the accused. Sandhya, I want to ask you, so what Leena was saying, right, that the narrative, though there is now a lot of sympathy and outrage and, everybody is saying, how did the girl not speak? Slowly, steadily, like what we saw in the Surya Nelly case, there is a villainization of that victim which will happen, of that family. Their morality will be questioned, and that will become center stage even at court. So, do you fear that will happen again in this case? What happened in Surya Nelly?
This is very likely, see, there are double marginalizations here. One, there are double marginalizations here. One, she comes from a Dalit background. The second is she is a woman, she's a girl, child, and they're living in extremely, they're living in a colony, the settlement, as you say. Um, and this entire thing, the family also could have consented, or she went on her own consent, or she's of a bad character. These are all aspects which are going to be played out, and it will be some kind of other stories could also be brought out, that there is money involved and things like that, trying to discredit her statements. The defense lawyers will bring out something. It's we just have to be open to it. The key is that what I am really, as a lawyer also, what I would really want is that there has to be a special prosecutor, and there has to be proper legal support from the very beginning, because what is going to happen now is there's going to be so much of pressure on the family and the girl to compromise. Now all these 50 plus or 58 plus people who have been identified, if just imagine, when one case there is an accused, there is a lot of intimidation happening, there's a lot of pressure to settle the case. 58 people just going, it will be like swooping on the whole family. So there will be money. If the father is actually an alcoholic, they will use that, and it's going to be one mess unless she is protected. So, if you need a proper resolution, proper conviction of all these 58 people who are being involved, if they are not to be scot free, we will have to really ensure that the case gets monitored from the very beginning. Otherwise, it could happen like Surinali, where when it came to the High Court, actually only one person was convicted, you know. Or it could happen like the Bishop case, or I mean, in in all these cases, um, the first stage is immaterial when the FIR is registered. The actual thing would be when the charge sheet is filed, and how is the statement being recorded, is she getting counseling. All these factors will really have to look into, because otherwise these 58 people whom we are seeing now who are just being arrested, there is nothing happening. There will be so many petitions in the High Court trying to quash the cases, trying to say that, this is something like a revenge thing, and she's just named people left, right, and center. All these aspects will be coming in. So she will really need protection. The CWC will have to really come in. Now that she is 18, she is beyond the CWC's control, but still, that there has to be a proper witness protection mechanism. Otherwise, all what she has stated will be like, a line drawn in water.
And there are minors involved. Yeah, Pooja, you want to say something?
No, I want to say, from what I understand, to my mind, this problem is more social than legal, because the Kerala government, like Sandhya said,
minors. I mean, it's also the fact. No, so what I'm saying is, it's like when we talk about ideologies, we talk about ideologies, we talk about liberal left ideologies, which is like, we talk about, we hold that very carefully, we hold it high in Kerala. But what I'm saying is, youngsters have gone beyond that. I mean, they are fed on Instagram, they're fed on social media, and what is the kind of messaging they're getting? It's more like, oh wow, there's a girl whom we can utilize. It's that kind of thing, that is the messaging which is going around these guys. So that is the thing. It's not a question of, when you were asking, Dhanya, you were saying, wasn't there even one person who could have kind of, stood apart and said, this girl needs help? That was not there at all. That was not there at all. So that shows how base the minds are, and especially when you're looking at a child from the colony, how people look at a child from the colony, that she can be used like anything.
Yeah, Tara, yes, go on.
I'm reminded of the Anekal case that happened in Karnataka a few years back. At that point, as activists, we had seen that the woman had even broken bones from assault and rape. And when we went to the action, it wasn't moving. The charge sheet wasn't being filed. The FIR wasn't being filed. And then the charge sheet took a long time. The case wasn't progressing at all. And the woman was living in fear. And she was not a local either. She was from the north, one of the northeastern states. And when some of us activists approached the minister at that point, the first thing they said was, but at that site, condoms were found. Right? So, socially, there is the taboo that if the woman has at all had a boyfriend or sexual relations or any kind of consensual intimacy, then rape is perfectly fine, right? So people refuse to distinguish. The whole notion of consent is a huge problem in India, and we know that from the marital rape exception that we continue to have. India needs to understand that women aren't just going to come out and speak every time they're exploited, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's sexual violence, whatever it is. It's traumatic and we don't want to talk about it. But when it gets unbearable, it's going to happen. The real question to ask is what you asked. What prevents the onlookers, so many men who have no skin in the game, who are not the ones that are going to be affected, from speaking about it? She has to continue to live in the same community. Whether there is 1 conviction or 60 conviction, because of her poverty, she can't just uproot and go off into a city, no?
No, and Leena, just to bring you here, when I was talking to the police yesterday, they were saying that the problem is not just assimilating her back to her residence, into her residential area, but even the college, right? Because there are one classmate and 4 college mates have been arrested. So it's a huge battle ahead.
So there are two things that stand out for me here, Danya. One is, what is happening to our boys? What is happening to the young men of India and their understanding of what is consent? How criminal and debased is the idea of sex that they go and do gang rapes and, film it and pass on a woman that they know, recommend to their friends. So what is all the, in the family, in the community, all ideas of this is like protect our girls, protect our women, curtail their freedom, make them, come back home on time. But are you really checking on what the boys and what the young men are grooming upon, what the Insta feeds have, what is technology? And the second big thing is technology itself, the thing that was supposed to bring more openness and bring more freedom is leading to many gruesome crimes being committed on the dark web, for example, where people are being tortured, made to self-immolate themselves for the fun of other people. We have heard these stories internationally of how the dark web operates. But here, technology itself becomes a weapon that can be used. One still of yours, one video of yours is used to further, threaten you to perform for other people. And you're put into a very vulnerable loop from which you don't know who to trust and whom to go about, because this evidence, electronic digital evidence of this act is with multiple people now, and you're always trying to protect yourself from that. So all in all, a very dangerous situation, and a point, I think, where Malayali society have to really sit up and think, what is it that it can do to make its young men think more seriously about what they're watching, what they're commenting, how they are operating, Boche and his fans, all of this kind of skewed idea of sexuality in Kerala and Malayali men. I don't know, you and me have grown up going to college in Kerala, and one thing, Sandhya, you too, one thing we all say about growing up in Kerala is that you cannot be on the public street without being touched inappropriately.
In fact,
whereas any other South Indian state,
Tamil Nadu is very much like that.
I have never felt that there. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But I can just give an example. I mean, Pooja would know. In the office, I always ask, do you carry safety pins to theatres?
Yes.
Right.
Do you
So you
carry it
can
in
provoke
Bangalore?
them.
No, not in Bangalore. In my hometown, we always used to carry a safety pin when we used to go. So now, people ask me, why don't I go back and live in Kerala? I would tell them that I will ask every young woman I meet in Kerala whether they still have to carry safety pins, and I don't want to go back there.
But that's a theatre you're talking about. Growing up in buses, right? Public
yes.
buses.
I'm talking about buses
Buses
only.
are
in
different.
Tamil Nadu.
every
Buses
year
are
altogether.
same.
Bus
Exactly.
is-
So
is
you
the
put
most
a
unsafe.
bag in the front and one at the back.
Right.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
No, so
You
those who are
always walk with the
watching
bag in
us
hand.
could be from different states, so do write to us at South Central at thenewsminute.com, especially if you're women.
Also, when you're talking about the bus, there's one thing which it's been long years since I've traveled on the bus, but still, as soon as you get on the bus, all the women will crowd behind the driver's seat. The crowd, it's like, all of them will, go push forward to the front. They'd not go towards the back or towards the center, because that is not safe. It's much more safer to stand behind the driver, which is unsafe as such. So that is the situation we are living even in 2025 now, because this is the age which has come in 2025. We're still living
No,
in that.
imagine the daily battles, right? Going in a bus. I remember there used to be one girl in my class in school who was supposed to be brave. And so we would always say she will be the person who
The
will be
last
like
person,
a standing
Barrier.
barricade or barrier or
Sentinel,
whatever.
yeah.
So before I go to Sandhya with two technical doubts that I have, I want to just make 2 points. Do read the ground report which Chris did from Pattanamthitta. It is there on the Kerala page of our site. But 2 things I noticed in that. One is, of course, the use of technology. In fact, the police officers we spoke to said that they are seeing a lot of cases where people reach out to young women, teens, whatever, through Instagram, and grooming is happening, right? Second is the women that Chris spoke to in that settlement. They were all angry at this young girl, saying that how can she be believed? How did this go on for so
this
long?
guy just married 1 month back. Now
Yeah.
he's been arrested, as if it's her fault that
He's gotten married now.
he's
That's
not
why
in
that
his-
psychology
yeah.
of trauma needs to
Yeah.
come out.
Right.
So,
right.
Sandhya, my question, sorry, you
I
want to
have
say?
a question though to all three of you. Now, how can the media play a constructive role in a situation like this, especially the local media, to make sure that at least the narratives, if not completely, can be sanitized, but to a certain extent are not taken in a victim-shaming sort of a narrative?
So, Sandhya, I want to add one more question to that. How can the media play a constructive role is what Pooja is asking. My question to you is that there are minors involved here. So what the police officers told us is that there are a few people who are still CCL, children in conflict with the law, and there were 2 or 3 of them who were minors when they assaulted this young woman. So how will that play out when there are minors involved in the case? So 2 questions.
See, when there are minors, let me take the second one first. When there are minors involved, definitely the JJ Act will apply. And they will. The thing is, again, since most of them are, between the age of 17 and 18, uh, there will be that preliminary assessment kind of thing where you decide whether the child committed the crime as an adult or as a child or whatever. So that kind of thing will happen. Now, see, but I am very suspicious about this entire process now, because all these are young guys, and now, as you say, that people were shaming her for having complained. Many women were not believing. So all these things are going to definitely play out, and there's going to be a lot of stigma attached. So there is going to be this entire thing about, we have to really see whether the case will, whether they will try to, pressurize her. That is going to really happen. Now, how can the media, that's really going to happen? I don't know. From this 50, by the time actual cases, when if charge sheet is filed, we don't know how many will fall off, or how many will be there, how many are going to be acquitted. That is one thing. Secondly, how can media shape the narrative? It's very important that we understand that she was a minor when this happened. Grooming was happening. We cannot really take the excuse that she consented. That has to go, not to allow any other narratives coming in, which would say that she had tried to take her family needed the money, or she's using that because because there was a revenge involved, or all those kind of factors. All those factors will come in. She asked for money, or she's been doing this, she did it with consent. All those factors are really going to come in, and we will have to be really steer clear of that.
So before I close, Leena, I want to point out something very important which Sandhya said, which is basically grooming, right? And the court has to understand, not court, she said the media, but I want to say the court has to understand that even if it borders, if people say, okay, but she gave her consent, she went here, she went there, this is a child you're talking about. And grooming is something which is internationally recognized, where people entice young children to sexually groom them, either by giving things or telling them things. And then the child is made to believe that that is okay, that what is happening with them is okay. But in the Bishop Franco case, Leena, we saw that the judge did not understand the fiduciary relationship between a nun and a bishop, right? They completely ignored the fact that the nun is under the the rule of the power of
There's
a
a
bishop,
power
right?
equation there.
Yeah, I mean, very skewed power equation. It was completely ignored. So I don't know, can we look up to magistrates and judges to understand grooming?
Yeah, the moment the word grooming came into this, I was like, all these years we have been trying to, the whole ecosystem, media, judiciary, the civil society, who will all, in some way shape up how this girl is going to survive this. So many years we have tried to make this conversation about consent. And people understand what consent is. So many movements in a recent past have happened, and still people don't understand what runs at the core of consent. That women having their bodily autonomy, even in a marriage, to their right to say no to sex and all that. That hasn't even even
Sunk
1%
in.
of that layer had not got. Women understand what this is about, right? But men still
Not all
refuse.
women also.
Not all women
Yeah.
too, yeah. But and into this conversation, into this ecosystem, we are now bringing grooming. There are two very important points that Sandhya has put forward. It's having a special prosecutor to oversee the case and the investigation, to have a strong, watertight case being built, and it should not be on the sole testimony of the survivor. It has to have strong corroborating
So
evidence.
apparently there is digital evidence, because the phone still has messages, is what the
right.
police are saying. So
Right.
I'll just
Danya, I
yeah.
have one comment to Pooja's question of what media can do around this. In rape cases, sexual assault cases, inevitably the focus ends up being on the survivor and or the incident. Uh, and then of course the investigation, police, courts, etc. What we never do is to focus on the men involved. At least 90% of the cases of sexual assault, it is man on woman, right? While you can't necessarily do a character sketch of the accused because it perhaps unfair, right? But we can use the opportunity every time there is a rape case or a sexual assault case in focus to look at, to bring to the audience that the men who rape are ordinary men. The men who assault are men who wear suits, men who are activists, men who are IT engineers, men who are lawyers, men who go about their daily lives, men who may be married, who are. So this is not coming out at all. So the world has an opinion of this monster when we see this everyday men are doing this every day, right? So using this opportunity, perhaps you look at convictions of earlier cases. You don't have to mention the case, but you're doing portrayals, right? You look at parallels in this case of the 60 accused, and without compromising the accused themselves, you can do character sketches, portrayals. You can do sort of contextual.
Because you said this, I'm closing the topic here. When Nidhi had done the story on Dilip saying an orchestrated nightmare, it starts, for those who have not read the story, it's an 11,000 word story. Where we went into the case where the woman actor is assaulted in Kerala, right? So the first act, it's divided into 10 chapters. The first chapter is an interview with this guy called Manigandan, who was there in the car when the sexual assault of the actor was taking place. He did not do any assault himself, but he was very much there in the car and watching it. Yeah. So, in that story, she talks about how there is an eagle, that he was wearing a earring and he had a tattoo and all. And people are like, why do you want to, what is his description of a criminal? Because criminals are your everyday people. For a lot of people, the reality is the criminal could be their father, their uncle, their grandfather, granduncle. It could just be anybody, right? So the whole point was to describe him as a very normal person, that he had a tattoo, he had a earring, etc. So that was one of our first attempts to do that. Yeah.
Also to humanize them, right?
It's not to humanize them, I feel, but to say that they are humans. That monster thing.
In all our heads, they're abstract, right?
Yeah,
I'm saying we can't look at them as abstracts.
Yeah, in that way, yes. Yeah. Okay, so we'll quickly go to the recommendations. Sandhya, do you have a recommendation for people watching, listening, etc.?
Yeah, there's a book by Flavia called Law and Gender Inequality. And that is, I feel we all should read, because that's very simplifies that entire landscape of feministic jurisprudence, and especially when you are talking about women's, engagement with law within the criminal system, whether it be 498A, whether it be sexual violence. This would be really helpful for us to understand and navigate.
Okay, I hope somebody has some fun recommendations. It was a very serious episode. I'm sure we're going to get mails from people saying, how serious are you people? But then this was an important story to discuss. Tara, what is your recommendation?
Saida Hamid's Drop in the Ocean. It's an incredibly touching book. She is a Padma Shri. She was in the Planning Commission, National Commission for Women. It has a foreword by Dr. Manmohan Singh. So I highly recommend. Beautifully written. Personal is political. Highly recommend. Very good read.
So my recommendation for the week is The Anarchy by William Dalrymple. It very succinctly captures the progress of the East India Company in taking commercial and then political interests in India.
Yeah, and if you don't want to read such a long book, there is a nice audio version of that book. So I would recommend the audio version too.
But it's better if you read the book.
Hey, audio version is also very nice. So. Yeah. Leena?
Palestine again is in mind with the Trump administration coming in and Bibi going for peace in that background. So I'd recommend Joe Sacco's graphic novel Palestine today.
I'm recommending an article from 2020, but it's resurfaced on The Atlantic. It's called History Will Judge the Complicit. It's a slightly longish one, but because Trump has come back to power, it is much more relevant. So I recommend that you read it.
So I have two recommendations. One is this book called The Delhi Model by Jasmine Shah. Now, the reason I recommend it is not because everything that is written there is something I agree with. Or he's basically written about how the Aam Aadmi Party has focused on health, education, and certain parameters and welfare measures, right? But I think you should read the book because this is a public policy professional who becomes a politician. So I felt kind of inspired that okay, there is someone who's made that shift from
That
one.
is why you're recommending the book?
Yeah, because I think more people should enter politics, right? From all kinds of professions.
Right.
It's very, very important. Therefore, lawyers, journalists, public policy professionals, activists should all become politicians.
You know, I went from politics to policy.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So anyway, so I think that is one, and the second is an article in the New Yorker. It's called. It's on Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, but it's called "The Collapse of the Hollywood Me Too Era." It's a very interesting article which talks about how, okay, when the Me Too movement broke out, there were people who were ready to believe women, but now that movement is totally broken. There are the pushback is immediate and much more severe. That the Me Too era is broken is what the New Yorker says. It's very well written. And third recommendation, of course, actually I have three. Sorry.
How come you get so many?
Okay, fine. I will not
Okay,
give. But the
go ahead,
Vultures
go ahead.
article on Neil Gaiman, it's like, I mean, only if you can process it, you should read it. Otherwise, I would say stay away from it. But I was a big fan of the book Coraline. So, and I felt very disappointed. Yeah. So that's about it today. We will come back to you next Friday. As I said, South Central appears on podcast platforms on YouTube every Friday. Make this your weekend listening routine. And thank you to all the guests. Thank you to Megha Mugundan, our producer for the week. Bhuvan is away, right? Yeah.
Yes, Bhuvan, as we speak, is on a ship. He's going to Nicobar from Port Blair. It's a 48-hour journey. So, two of our colleagues are traveling across Andaman and parts of Nicobar, and they're bringing some very important stories from the region. Apart from, along with the fact that there is a new port being built, a mega project, also, much more layered coverage will come from there. So you can watch out for that. There'll be videos, there'll be text stories, but also you can contribute if you want to support.
No, most importantly, you must contribute. We started a small fund for it because these two people have to travel. They are staying back there for a few days to do a lot of stories. So to all the audience, please do contribute. Back to Megha Mugundan. Thank you very much. Ajay, Jasim, Vignesh Manikam, and all the others who work on South Central.